Okay, so we've covered, we've just recently talked about Oklahoma and the Oklahoma family.
Oh, I was going
Let's-
to let me tell you a fun story about that Oklahoma family. You know, I took Jeannie down there. She'd been there since she was 6 years old.
What town in Oklahoma was this?
Ponca City.
Ponca City.
Yeah. It's just off Route 70. And it had 2 oil refineries, City Service and Conoco. One was at each end of town. So all you could smell was oil refinery when you were there. You just
And this is where Grandpa grew up as a kid? Did he live there
Yeah.
throughout his childhood?
Yeah. It's later years, not as his early years, but his later years. People were very nomadic in those days. Dad was born in Chillicothe, Missouri. At any rate,
How far was Chillicothe, Missouri from there?
I don't know. I never.
Oh, so he was born in because that's where his mom was from. So when they first
Yeah.
got married, they were probably in.
Yeah. So, well, at any rate, and you know, my grandfather was a carpenter, I think. And when they tried to when he had this accident, they tried to say he fell on the job and injured himself so that they would get compensation. That didn't work out.
Yeah.
But at any rate, Mother would say to me after my dad died, and I traveled, you know, I was going to California, and she'd always say, stop and see the girls. They were no longer girls, but I would.
Would you have done it anyway, or was it?
I
because
probably
she
would
said
have
that?
because I could make it on the way. You know, I could make it on the way, just a little jog in the road. So I went there one day. Now, Leota was a character. She really was. She was a girl from Ponca City, Oklahoma, who came up here once. She was going to be on a 2-week vacation, and she stayed like 3 days, and she had to go home. She just couldn't. She couldn't be away. So she lived with Grandma, and I told you they took care of Grandpa. So I came around the corner, and they lived on South 6th, and Grandma's house was not there anymore. It was just a vacant lot. The houses didn't have basements; they sat on pilings.
And how long has it been since you've been there at that time?
Oh, I used to go like every couple of years.
So it could have been a couple of years, and
Yeah,
now you bring
yeah.
Jeannie by.
So we get there, and Leota's living like 4 houses down.
And would you call them ahead? Would they know?
Oh, they knew I was coming, yeah. Now, Mamie and Dick were always off antiquing. I hardly ever saw them. But I'd stop and see Leota. And, you know, I understood. She never turned the lights on because if you put the lights on, you can't see what's going on outside when it gets dark. So you sit in the dark, then you can see what's going on outside.
Jesus.
But we would talk, and she had weird ideas, and we just let that go.
What do you mean?
Grandma gave her a favor. Remember for favors, all these things Grandma was like the March of Dimes. You always had a little wooden block with an American flag in it on the table, you know. So she gave one to Leota as a little something. And Leota told me that the Jehovah's Witnesses would come and read, but they didn't want her to have that little American flag there. They don't like that. And I said to them, no, you don't have to come and read to me, but if you want to come and read to me, you're going to read to me with my little American flag on my table. That's the way that's going to be. And she always had.
Were they Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, they just,
They just like them coming in.
some was company. She had in her petticoat 2 pockets. That's where she kept her burying money. She kept telling her, the money is in my petticoat. So I came around the
For
corner.
burying money?
Her burying for her funeral. So I came around the corner, and I remember it was August, and I was very suntan, and I had on a yellow shirt, and I was ferrying a car to Los Angeles, a Cadillac, and she knew I was coming, so I pulled up in front of the house, and I honked the horn, and I got out, and I said, hi. Figured she knew who I was. This is what she said to me. George, is that you? And I said, well, of course. Well, thank God, I thought you was a nigger. So I said to her, the house where Grandma and Grandpa lived is gone. And she told me this story, which I told it to my friend Terry, who was a poet, and he published it as a poem. She had this way of talking, and I can imitate her because I talked to her so much. She said, "My child," I'm not answering that. "I'm sitting here one day in my chair, and I hear all this ringing and banging, just ringing and a banging, and child, there be dust flying everywhere." So I got up and I walked out and I looked, and child, there was this big old machine backing up and hitting Mama's house. It was backing up and hitting Mama's house. Child, I got tired. I sat. Later in the afternoon, this truck went by with all this kindling up on the top. And up on the very top was Mama's bathtub. And I said, if I had me a camera, I'd have took out a picture and sent it to Vera and said, "Why, Vera, there goes Mama's tub." And I was at Mamie's one night.
Had the house just stood vacant, or?
I don't know, but there was an old house, and they just knocked it down. She was complaining. She would do this because she didn't want to watch that TV. Them damn TVs give me a headache. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting at Mamie's house. I think that was when Vera died. I went down for Vera's funeral. That was another thing. I was in the seminary. I couldn't put two pennies together. I took your mother's Pinto and I drove to Ponca City in fucking August. It was so hot. And I didn't have any money for a motel. But my mother thought somebody from the family should be there. Well, they said they were going to bury her on Tuesday. So not wanting to overstay my welcome, I got there on Tuesday. Well, I got there on Monday afternoon, late Monday. And I called Leota and I said, and this is how you talk to them. He said, "Leota, this is Leo's boy, George, and I'm here for Vera's funeral." And this is what she said to me. "Why, honey, we done buried her this morning." And I said, "You told me Tuesday." "Well, I know, honey, but Johnny was so upset, that was her son, and we just couldn't prolong it another day." So she said, "But I'll call Mamie and we'll get together at Mamie's." So I took a shower.
Because now you're like, I just drove all this fucking
Yeah, and all I wanted to do was get fucking drunk off of it. So,
you're like, never mind, I don't need to visit.
Yeah, I don't.
We'll just go get a cocktail.
So we're sitting there. Merrill, my cousin, Merrill, well, he'd been in the Navy in World War II, so he had a vocabulary like a trooper, you know. And we were sitting there. I'm thinking to myself, I look back, my family. So we're sitting there, and Leota is complaining about the fact that her rent has gone up to $15 a month. And she's got like 3 rooms, not much, tar paper shack. And Merrill says to her, he calls her Leota, "Leota, you know, Social Security took over the old age pension. Why don't you go down there and get some of that government housing?" And Leota says, "I'm gonna go down there and live with all them niggers and Indians."
Oh, Jesus.
He's-
She's the one that said she thought you were...
I was a nigger.
Yeah.
And so she's the one that was blue from sniffing Silver Ale. And he says to her, "Wow, woman, they'd knock on your door and you'd open it up and they'd see that ugly blue kisser of yours. They never would quit running the other way." And I said to myself, my family.
Wow.
Yeah. I do believe I was only there one more time after that. And I took Grandma. I think it was 1963. But at any rate, yeah, that was that.
I think that's probably a good point. Was there anything else about the Oklahoma family that you wanted to say, or?
No, I love Patsy. She's still alive. And I felt sorry for her that her mother was so rotten to her, you know. She swears her mother killed her little sister because her mother had a violent temper. Mm-hmm. And she thinks she smacked her and knocked her down. Mm-hmm. The last thing I remember about my Uncle Dick was he was sitting in a chair in the corner of the living room, and he knew that I was going to leave and he was never going to see me again. And he was crying when I kissed him goodbye.
And who's that?
That was Mamie's husband, okay. Dick. And I don't know why he loved her, because she treated him like a piece of shit, really. I mean, the minute he became homebound, smacked his ass in a nursing home. We were down there, Jeannie and I, we went to see the girls. They were both in the nursing home. Leota could still talk at that time. That was 1963, I guess. No, 83. It was after Grandma died. Anyway, Leota had always her hair cut like a Dutch boy. And they called each other honey, those two girls. And Leo, the way they talked to Leota would say, honey, would you, next time you come and you bring some scissors, just lock this off. Just block. The last time I went to see her, she was blind as a bat and deaf as a post. And that's the way she ended the last 20 years of her life, laying in a bed.
20 years?
20 years.
What was wrong?
She just got old. She was 100 when she died. Grandpa was 68, she was 100. Yeah. Yeah, she and Mamie were living in the same nursing home.
But that's not much of a life, is it?
No, she gave up her life to take care of her father and her mother. And when her father died, she took care of her mother. And they all said, what's going to happen to Leota when Grandma dies? She went on and got herself a job as a caregiver.
How was she when Grandpa died? Because that was her twin. Was that hard?
Well, she didn't come here. Mamie came here. Mamie and Dick came, but that's the only ones that came. I mean, Vera was in Washington State. She couldn't come that far. And I don't think anybody was going to bring Leota, you know. So, all she ever said about him was that she said at the nursing home one time to some caregiver that I was her twin brother's youngest son. And they said, oh, how is he? And she said, oh, I lost him a long time ago. You know. As children, they had a good life, you know. It's when they got older and started going their own ways that things got kind of crappy. Grandma was my grandmother. Those girls were just hens. And we'd be there and we'd be sitting on Grandma's porch. They had a porch swing, you know, and some chairs. And sat outside at night because it was the only place that was cool. And they would start going at Grandma. Well, now, Mama, when you die, I get this, right, Mama? When you die, I get that, Mama, right? That candy dish over there was my grandmother's. Every time we go down there, she'd give something to my mother. And my mother would say, no, Mama, it's the girls. Relia, I want you to have this. So we're down there one time, and it's like September. And about 5:30 in the morning, there's terrible noise in the alley. My grandmother took all of her crystalline china out and smashed it in the garbage can. And then she said to them, we don't have to talk about that anymore because it isn't. In other words, shut up, I'm sick of it. So that's what she did with all that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, I think we'll call that one a wrap for another session. And I think probably that's good for today. I think that was the
All
first
right.
session.